former girlfriend and victim of Jeffrey Epstein, is suing the late sex trafficker's estate, claiming he boasted of being a Mossad agent before raping her at his New York mansion. Ben Menashe, he's former Mossad. He claims that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were working for Mossad. Alexander Acosta, if you remember, he's the former U.S. Labor Secretary. He allegedly said that, when they were asking why did Epstein get such a lenient deal, he got a sweetheart deal in 2008. The deal allowed him to plead guilty to 2 state charges of soliciting prostitution, one involving a minor, in exchange for federal immunity for himself and his co-conspirators, and he only served 13 months in a county jail, during which he was allowed to leave during the day. So Acosta was asked about this. What did Acosta say? He said, well, I was told basically it was above my pay grade. He said he was told to back off and that Epstein was intelligence and to leave it alone. So now you have Acosta, who was the federal prosecutor in Miami, saying, while he's being vetted for a presidential cabinet, he's saying, I was told to back off, that he's intelligence, leave it alone. That right there is a pretty damning statement that proves that Epstein was in fact Mossad. And then you've got, on top of it, you have Ari Ben Menashe, who used to be Mossad, saying, yeah, the guy was Mossad. And he was running a honey trap operation. So you've already got 2 right there. But then you got Robert Maxwell. One of the points that shows that he might be Mossad is this. It's a software called Promise that Robert was distributing. But he allegedly distributed a bugged version of this Promise software to national governments, global financial institutions. Now, Promise was a software that was created to streamline case management for prosecutors by tracking defendants, witnesses, and evidence across various legal proceedings.
Hey, can you pause that
and
for a
Maxwell's
second?
bugged software.
Now, this is really fascinating. This is fascinating. So we're looking at Epstein. We're asking the question, does he have connections to Mossad? And it's like, oh, we don't know. We don't know. What's Les Wexner's connections to Mossad? We don't know, but Wexner gave Epstein all his money, and then Epstein's former Wexner's former place was used by Epstein for blackmail operations to benefit the state of Israel. But we still don't. We don't know. We don't know. But that point right there that she just made about Promise software. Remember how I just showed you Comverse and Amdocs as far as like the intel sniffing? It's a telecommunications hub that went Americans' information goes to Israel first before it comes back to America is basically how it works. This Promise software is promising because when you take a look at the Prosecutor's Management Information System, Promise, it was created by Mossad. And it was sold with a back door in it by Robert Maxwell to American companies, international companies. Here's Robert Maxwell right here. Okay. And he's Dirty Bird. And, he's got kids that work not just in pedophilia. He's got kids that work with Klaus at the World Economic Forum. And I think that's Christine Maxwell. So there's a whole bunch. And his dead body was found at sea and all this sort of stuff. So when his daughter, the Mossad agent's daughter, the Mossad agent that was selling backdoor prosecutorial. What is that? Is that our justice system? Is that the FBI that they're backdooring? The blackmail people, they're backdooring the FBI. Oh, it's very interesting. Okay, so prosecutor. So somebody looked into this one time. They said, there might be a story here. I think, what was his name? Danny Casolaro. He was found dead in a hotel, but it wasn't the Mossad who killed him, I'm sure, because they don't do things like that. Promise software was definitely not used around the 9/11 insider trading and didn't have any connections to these 9/11 attacks either. So you shouldn't look into it because people who look into it, historically, some of them, they die because the Mossad definitely doesn't kill people. Here's another software company, P-Tech. You could check that out. That's a similar type of operation of, don't worry about the people stealing money. Rogan used to have this quote. He's like, Bernie Madoff. He's like, dude, he's ripping off smart people. He's like, they could definitely rip us off. Yes, that's going on. They can definitely rip you off. They rip you off by getting you to believe things that aren't true in the first place. They rip you off by getting you to overlook a thing like Promise and all the history that goes with that story alone that ties back to the state of Israel. Well before 9/11, by the way. So there's a long history prior to what we know as the biggest terrorist event in American history, a day that changed everything for a lot of people. That fact is often left undone. So now let's cut back to Kim. Now that you have context on why you might want to look into Promise software a little bit closer in the history of the body count it has stacked over the years. Let's go back to Kim.
Line case management for prosecutors by tracking defendants, witnesses, and evidence across various legal proceedings. And Maxwell's bugged software version allegedly gave the Israeli government a backdoor to spy. So they could get into all of these different government institutions, financial institutions. They could get in there and they could use this software and find things out about these companies and governments. He reportedly sold the bug software to Sandia National Laboratories and Los Alamos National Laboratory, which were key nuclear research and national security facilities in the United States. The UK's Foreign Office suspected Maxwell of being a secret agent for multiple governments, potentially a double or triple agent. He had known connections with MI6, the Soviet KGB, and also Mossad. When he died, and he died a very suspicious death.
Just consider those all the same thing. He worked for one place. They had 3 offices. Go ahead, continue.
He was on his yacht. He was known for taking a piss off the side of the yacht in the middle of the night here and there. And one of those nights, he apparently fell off the side of the boat and drowned. Actually, they say he had a heart attack and drowned when they later recovered his body.
That part. If you were in the business, let's speak hypothetically for a second. If you were in the business of exit strategies for human beings and you had to design, hey, Robert Maxwell is no longer, he's persona non grata here at Mossad. We've got to get rid of this guy. Somebody come up with a plan that's plausible that looks like an accident, right? Just like we discussed a couple weeks ago with the president of Iran. It's like, here's exactly, I could write that out in 10 minutes. This is how it can go on. This guy, all you have to do is, not stake out, but you have surveillance on the guy. And what are his habits? Mossad's going to attack habits because then it's plausible deniability, right? So, if he likes to piss off the side of his yacht in the middle of the night, leave a little soapy suds there, accidents happen, and they get rid of the guy, but they don't have direct causality coming back to them until one of their guys admits it years later, as they usually do. Mossad denies at the time. Like, if you think back 3 or 4 hours in this podcast tonight, there was Mark Negev, I think is his name, Mark Regev, who is today an Israeli IDF spokesman, apologist for genocide and ethnic cleansing. He was in that 9/11 ABC clip about Israelis involved in 9/11. He said absolutely nothing to do with it. And I was like, that's the same guy we play clips of. There's hundreds of clips I played of Mark Regev. We could use Clip Genie to find Mark Regev. We've talked about him. So he has a long history of telling, what he feels are lies on behalf of his state because of national security. He has to deny involvement when they do assassinations and they take out political people, right? Like Aaron Schwartz, or who's Seth Rich, or Michael Hastings, or Danny Casolaro, or Gary Webb. Any of those inconvenient truths that start to come to light, Mossad's there to deal with it in history. If there's a Palestinian guy making bombs, they could put a little piece of RDX in his cell phone and call it and blow his head off. If the Iranian president has done some stuff, maybe they want to take something, they can make a mechanical failure. Famous because they do war by deception. So when in the picture, you have to consider that what they're saying is not the truth because they tell you the truth up front. The only truth they're going to tell you is on the seal of the Mossad, and it says, thou shalt make war by deception. So anyway, that's my rant. But it's also a book right here. That's a book. By way of deception. The making and unmaking of a Mossad officer. Not saying everything, I can't trust everything he says in here because he's a Mossad officer. He's trained to lie. But it's an interesting little book. And, if you got time to read, that's a book you can read. All right. So moving forward, we still have the rest of this. Let's go back to Kim. And we're still learning about Promise software, Robert Maxwell's sale of it to where? Nuclear facilities. Places they wanted to spy on is where they sold that Promise software because it had a back door. It's interesting because when I was a whistleblower and I blew the whistle on software that was being mandated to every publicly traded company in this country, and it had a back door in it, and I thought, wow, nefarious people could really do a thing on our market if that was left intact. And I risked and sacrificed unwittingly a very lucrative career to try to do the right thing. If you would have told me that the place was run by criminals, I probably wouldn't have done that. So let's go back to Promise Software and let's learn a little bit about more of the road that has led here that heretofore has been obscured from most people's awareness.
Nights, he apparently fell off the side of the boat and drowned. Actually, they say he had a heart attack and drowned when they later recovered his body. His daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, never believed that story. Many people never believed that story. They did not believe that he just suddenly fell over the edge. He had done it all the time, or maybe it was, maybe there's more to that. Maybe it was impossible to do. It seemed impossible to do. So many people do not believe that he actually fell off of his boat in the middle of the night taking a piss. They think that he was killed and then body dumped or thrown off the edge or something along those lines. The question is, who did it? Now, many people think the allegations or the suspicions are that Mossad themselves actually did it, that they decided to off their own guy because Robert Maxwell had gotten into quite a bit of financial trouble. He had been acquiring loads and loads of businesses. He couldn't get enough, and he kept taking out loans in order to do it. And he started to get into some real financial trouble, which all came out after his death. And some suspect, or there are rumors, that he actually had attempted to blackmail Mossad because he had so much information that he was going to take his information somewhere, and he was trying to blackmail the very organization that was getting him to do all kinds of things. And
now, let's say Robert Maxwell was in Mossad and he had some dirt on Mossad. That's totally plausible. Now, the next claim is Robert Maxwell attempted to blackmail the people who blackmail for a living, right? That's a bold move. Why might he do that, Scott? What power did Robert Maxwell have to be like, I'll blackmail you, and here's what I'll do if you don't do the thing? What did he own? What was he collecting?
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, that's, I mean, obviously it's probably the sexual blackmail. So, or wait.
Well, like he had all these media companies. He could like run it on the front page. He had connection to the public and millions of people before the internet. That was a legit threat. So you do have to take that guy out. If that really happened, if he did that, I could see they would definitely have to take that out. And that's why his daughter is sitting rotten in prison right now, because she knows enough to like stay alive, but if she says too much, they will make her unalive, just like the other guy she used to hang out with. Which, if they take Robert Maxwell out and they need a replacement, who better than his daughter to go get the next line of the blackmailers for Mossad, Epstein, Anglo-American establishment, the Six Eyes. We got to include Israel. We don't want to leave them out because that could be anti-Semitic. So it's the Anglo-American Israeli establishment. Might have to publish a book on that. That could be a thing. People might want to know. Although, you might get Robert Maxwell. So think about consequences before you take actions always. All right, let's go back to Kim. We're cleaning up this mess of Robert Maxwell, backdoors, and Epstein, pun intended.
That is just one of the suspicions. There's other suspicions. Of course, if you are spying for a government, you probably have a lot of enemies. There's a lot of people who probably want to get you. Also, if you have a lot of financial trouble, you might want to commit suicide. There's a lot of reasons why he might have died, but there is suspicion around his death. However, what is not unknown, what is actually quite very known, is what happened after he died when he ended up getting a state funeral in Israel. He was buried in Israel. They gave him a state funeral. Now, why would you give a guy a state funeral who's been living in the United Kingdom? Why would you give him a state funeral unless the guy was actually doing something for the state? Well, when he at his funeral, 6 serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence attended the funeral, and Prime Minister at the time, Yitzhak Shamir, actually gave the eulogy at Robert Maxwell's funeral. And
right,
during the
I think we all have to consider this beyond reasonable doubt. When you have the former heads of Mossad showing up to your funeral, when you have a state funeral, when there's former prime ministers showing up to your funeral, you did some sort of service to that place. Even if they whacked you, they're going to use you as an example for their ongoing political agenda. So I think that would be case closed right there. How much more evidence would you need? What would it look like? And what are you waiting for? So anyway, let's go back.
Eulogy, he said, he has done more for Israel than can be today told. Sounds like possible Mossad. So the thinking is that Robert Maxwell was the one who, that somehow Ghislaine Maxwell and Robert Maxwell and Epstein got together, that Robert Maxwell was the one that brought him into Mossad, or Ghislaine Maxwell was in Mossad from her father, and she's the one that roped Epstein into Mossad. But for just thinking about Ghislaine Maxwell and her father being highly suspected of being a Mossad asset or agent, and then her former boyfriend, both of them died suddenly in suspicious circumstances. Then her boyfriend also being suspected of being Mossad. I mean, she is the link, and so it makes a lot of sense that that would happen. So the big thing now that we've established more evidence that Epstein is probably Mossad, where's the client list? That's what we all want. We all want to know, who was he potentially blackmailing? Who is working, is compromised, essentially, and doing whatever it is that Mossad wants them to do because there's some compromising something on them. Well, so far, the list that we have, the identified as possible clients or participants in illegal activities. Okay, so these people are not convicted, but this is, they've been identified as participants in illegal activity. There's been illegal activity accused of them. That is Ghislaine Maxwell, Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, Jean-Luc Brunel, Marvin Minsky, Glenn Dubin, Tom Pritzker. Now, there are a bunch of people who've been mentioned in the documents, but they're not implicated in any illegal activities. These are people who are named in a variety of contexts in these documents that we have so far. There's a lot of documents we don't have, but these are the documents we do. Now, these people have social connections all the way to allegations of criminal activity, but the documents revealed a wide network of associations, some of which include in illegal conduct, while others were merely just mentioned without implication of wrongdoing. But you've got Bill Clinton, who was frequently mentioned in documents with no direct implication of illegal activities. Donald Trump, mentioned in the documents, no direct implication of illegal activities. Hillary Clinton, mentioned in the context of being an association. David Copperfield, mentioned as showing up to some of the events. Leonardo DiCaprio, mentioned as an acquaintance. Al Gore, mentioned in the documents. Richard Branson, mentioned as an acquaintance. Stephen Hawking, mentioned. Ehud Barak, mentioned as an acquaintance. Michael Jackson, mentioned in the context of social gatherings. Kevin Spacey.
Friends of Smuley, just mentioned. All right, so I wanted to take you real quick. Before we left the promise story, I promise we'll learn about Danny Casolaro. All right, Joseph Daniel Casolaro was born in 1947, died in 1991, was an American freelance writer who came to public attention in 1991 when he was found dead in a bathtub of room 517 of the Sheraton Hotel in Martinsburg, West Virginia. His wrists slashed 10 to 12 times. Medical examiner ruled the death a suicide. A Netflix docuseries titled American Conspiracy, The Octopus Murders is centered around the Casolaro case. Now, I might have that book on my shelf, so I'll grab it. His death became controversial because his notes suggested he was in Martinsburg to meet a source about a story he called The Octopus. This centered on a sprawling collaboration involving an international cabal and primarily featuring a number of stories familiar to journalists who worked around D.C. The Inslaw case about software manufacturer who accused the Department of Justice, right? So it talks about Iran-Contra and BCCI, but if you go down, first off, he's squeamish about blood, so it's a funny way to kill yourself. But if you go down to the Inslaw case, Ron Rosenbaum, and there's a reference, he's a novelist. He writes that the Inslaw story alone is enough to drive a sane man to madness. Quote, If they ever make a movie about the Inslaw lawsuit, he writes, it could be called Mr. and Mrs. Smith Go to Washington to Meet Franz Kafka. Inslaw's founder, William A. Hamilton, a previous position at the U.S. Justice Department, had helped to develop a program called PROMISE, short for Prosecutors Management Information System. This is the software being sold by Robert Maxwell that had a backdoor in it to benefit the state of Israel and other people who might be perpetrating crimes at a cartel level. PROMISE was designed to organize the paperwork generated by law enforcement and courts. How convenient to have a backdoor in there. After he left the Justice Department, Hamilton alleged that the government had stolen PROMISE and distributed it illegally, robbing him of millions of dollars. That might have actually happened. They might have put the backdoor in after Hamilton designed it. The department denied this. Like, they would see that as an opportunity. This guy's going to put a piece of software in all these places. So let's put a backdoor and have everyone, access. That's all. So anyway, theories developed around the case, allegations that backdoors had been inserted in the software so whoever bought it could be spied upon. And then that leads back to the state of Israel, among other groups. But that's just history. That's just a little history. You don't need to know about history. It's all conspiracy theory. Nothing to see here. Go watch, Family Guy or American Dad or something. Definitely don't learn the history about PROMISE software. And wait, there's some more. Suspicions of homicide were presented on a U.S. television show, Unsolved Mysteries. That the owner of Islam, Michael Riconosciuto, and an attorney for Nixon administration were interviewed. So Riconosciuto, I think he might still be in prison. Let's check. Arrested electronics computer expert, arrested in 91 after providing, so he's kind of the whistleblower. Riconosciuto, he claimed to have reprogrammed Inslaw's case management PROMISE software with a secret backdoor to allow clandestine tracking of individuals. Riconosciuto stated that he had been threatened with prosecution by a Justice Department official who might have been under the influence of Mossad.
Twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week course. It teaches leadership, entrepreneur skills, executive skills, all these types of things that I saw were taken out of our education system in order to make the schooling or indoctrination system that we've all probably went through. And it has served us well enough to be interchangeable cogs in the machine of the globalists. But if we want a homestead, if we want write our own ticket, work from home job, work from anywhere type of situation, they're not exactly handing those out at the end of college. They give you a piece of paper and they're like, good luck. So reality is dropping us off here, but the demands of reality are up here. So I created Autonomy to help people close that gap for themselves so they can level up their skills to the demands of the situations that life is putting in front of us presently. Life's demands of intellect and understanding precision and complexity are ever increasing. The schooling didn't prepare us for it. The media is not going to do anything but reinforce what schooling prepared us for. And so we're going to have to take a leadership position and take steps off the beaten path to kind of blaze our own trail in life. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.